Welcome or welcome back to Kara Life Podcast. My name is Kenzie Rock and this is day 2 of 12 Days of Christmas. Like I mentioned, I'll be interviewing 12 guests for 12 days, but before we begin with today's interview, remember to follow my socials on Instagram at Kenzie_Rock100 and at Podcast by Kenzie. We are currently also on Twitter at Podcast by Kenzie and Kenzie Rock 100. So today's guest, ladies and gentlemen, is a 31-year-old Ghanaian who lives in the United States. He is married to a wonderful woman and works full-time but also writes in his part-time. Currently, he has authored a book known as Ochin's Odyssey that has created a fantastic world based on African culture, mythology, and precolonial history. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Samuel Anim Addo. Okay, Sam, welcome to Care Live.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so today's episode, I'd like to talk about you and your book as an author. I don't know if I'll get the name right. Ochin's Odyssey.
Yeah, it's almost right. It's Ochin's Odyssey.
Okay.
Yes. So it's a little bit of the Ghanaian colloquial. So that's why the KY is chit sound instead. My native language, which is tree. Ochin means to travel. So it's a traveler's odyssey, pretty much. So that's why I named them that way. I feel like it fit the story and the narrative.
Okay, so tell us about you, your childhood, your upbringing, and who you are today as Samuel.
Oh man, that's a tall tale. So I'll try to summarize it. I was born in Ghana, but I grew up in Ivory Coast, and I spent most of my formative years there. And then I spent some of my high school years in South Africa. And then after that, I lived in Tunisia for a year. And then after that, I came back to Ghana and then went to college in America, Florida specifically, and then from then on now I live in Ohio. So been a little bit of everywhere.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So
what's the book all about?
the book is pretty much a classic in a sense, a classic hero's journey, and it's about this young man who was born without a reflection. For pretty much 18 years in his life, he doesn't know why, and nobody's really provided with any answers. But on his 18th birthday, he receives this book. And as he begins to read this book, it begins to like warp. It kind of like teleports him into the middle of the Sahara Desert. And there is like this giant mirror that pretty much appears out of almost like nowhere, like from beneath the sands. In this mirror, he sees his reflection for the first time, and he's like, he thinks he's normal now, and as he's celebrating that, he's like, he's finally like getting some answers. His reflection pulls him through the mirror onto the other side of the mirror, and on this other side, there's a whole new world on the other side of the mirror that he has to, pretty much navigate and try to find a way back to his world. And so it serves as a kind of like a portal to a parallel universe kind of like a situation. And so the journey kind of like begins from there. It takes him on this wild ride where he comes into contact with gods and African mythologies and stuff like that, and kind of like has to navigate this world and this fantastical place and try to get back. And so it kind of turns into an odyssey almost, pretty much. And it's inspired a lot from pretty much the Homer's The Odyssey, how his journey kind of like just pretty much takes on this epic, just from him trying to get back home, and the turns and twists that he always seems to get himself into whenever he tries to like get close to coming back home.
Okay. So it's a little bit like Alice through the Looking Glass when Alice crossed over into a parallel universe through a glass, right?
Yes. It's definitely got that vibe to it. It's got the portal fantasy classic trope to it. So like, yeah, so Alice, same thing with like you can think of Harry Potter, Narnia. And so these are, the same kind of like mechanisms of like the portal fantasy, except instead of like, Harry Potter with the train station, or like Narnia with the wardrobe, this is with a mirror. And that's the portal mechanism that I use for this book.
So speaking of Narnia, I'm seeing that the first page of your book, you have a map, a certain place. I believe it's the where the story takes place.
Yes, the world beyond the mirror,
Um,
yes.
Yeah, could you explain a little bit about that and about the big five that technically on the first page of the book?
So the big five are the nations that dominate this world. They each pay reverence to their gods that they worship. These gods are like instrumental to how the world runs and how these nations kind of operate. And so the big five are pretty much like they're the UN sort of like of this world. And this world is pretty much have reached the unanimous peace pretty much, and these nations are pretty much dictate everything that happened in this world. And so that's why I call them the big five. And I also like also relate that to kind of like the big five of South African wildlife. So like how they have the lion and the elephant and stuff like that. I kind of always like that idea. And so like I kind of like used a little bit of that to like describe these nations, and also they a lot of them are related to their animal totems and stuff like that. So I kind of felt like it was fitting to name them the big five. And so the big five has like a dual meaning of like who they are, what they represent. But for the most part, it's because they are the giants of this world.
Okay, that's very interesting. And when you go a little bit further, there is the art of Ntokwa. I'll actually be mispronouncing a lot of words. I apologize
Oh
for
no,
that.
yeah,
But
that was about right. That was about right. Yeah,
oh, I
the
got
art
it.
of yeah, you
Nice.
did.
So, so what are the six element stances all about?
So the six element stances are pretty much is the different levels that you have to attain before you reach a mastery of that art, and it's pretty much the martial art that dominates that world. And so, if you see at the bottom, you have the earth, fire, water stance. Those are the basic elements that somebody who's an initiate, kind of like has to learn. And then from then on, you upgrade to the second level, which is the lightning stance and the air stance. And the last level, which is the level on top, is the storm stance. And that's, once you've attained that, that means you have reached the mastery, complete mastery of the art. The storm stance pretty much lets you know that you can go into any situation and either come out unscathed or win the battle without any problems at all. And so pretty much that those are the different levels of the stances. It's kind of like taking a little bit of inspiration from different martial arts. I was inspired by like, kung fu and a little bit of judo and capoeira, and it's a lot of elements that go into the martial, and a little bit of avatar too. But in this instance, it's not so much bending the elements. The elements are just a representation of what that martial art kind of like operates. And so if you're somebody who's using water stance, you move like the water, and so you're very elusive and kind of like swift in your movements. If you're using fire stance, you're very aggressive. Your movements are very abrasive and offensive. Same thing if you're using a air stance, you're very fast because you move like the wind kind of like situation. And if you're using lightning stance, you're very accurate, very pinpoint precision. Everything you do is very surgical. If you're storm stance, that means you're everything embodied. You're this, you're this force of nature that just coming through and sweeping everything away. And you can also be either the storm or you can also be the calm before the storm. And that is also very significant of like what a storm stance is. That means somebody who's also can be very calm and can master any situation, but can also be very destructive because he's so strong and so mastered in what he does.
So, Samuel, are you an author as a career, or is this just a side thing that you do?
I'm pretty much it's a side thing for me right now because I just started. This is like my debut novel, and so like I'm pretty much writing as a side. But I'm hoping that one day if things go well, God willing, that maybe one day I'll be able to do this full time and pretty much take it on and be able to consistently pump out books. But yeah, that's the hope is to be able to do it full time one day. But for now, it's part time.
A side
Thing.
hustle.
Right, exactly, exactly. It's a passion,
Oh,
It's a passion for me.
okay. So, what are some of the resources that helped you when you were coming up with this novel?
So pretty much how I first got the idea was the mirror was the first thing that popped up. So the mirror concept and being able to tell a story based on somebody else's, like just your reflection in general, because I always thought it was a curious thing. I always thought, what if your reflection came to life, and that was the first thing that came into my mind. And then the second thing that came into my mind is, what if your reflection had a whole life of its own on the other side of the mirror? That means if you look on the other side of the mirror, you're not necessarily seeing it, but what if your reflection had its own life on the other side? And on that other side, if he had his own life, then there would have to be a whole nother world to support it on that other side. And so I was imagining, this whole other world that would be or would exist on the other side of the mirror. And that's how the concept kind of like started snowballing. And before long, I was like, it'll be a great way to use it as that portal fantasy to kind of create a world where, African culture, mythology, legends, folklore, and all that stuff, like I could throw it on this world beyond the mirror and be able to like play around with it, be able to like tell a narrative, a hero's journey based on that whole concept and premise. And so that was the first thing that was the first concept that came to mind. And then of course the character came right after. And then from then on, I started building, and because I'm from Ghana, and the Ashanti cultures where I hail, specific, we had like Anansi, the spider god, and all that stuff. And so like he came right after, and because he's the god of stories and stuff like that, I incorporated him right away. And so pretty much after that, I started incorporating all the other different elements of not only Ashanti culture, but also African culture as a whole, because I feel like there was so much that I could pull from, so much to tell. And so I started doing research, mythologies from other places like the Orishas, from Nigeria, Yoruba, and then pretty much I went to the Swahili, South Africa with the Zulu, and also North Africa with Egypt. And so pretty much I was pretty much just hungrily just grabbing all kinds of like African mythology and delving into it and seeing what are these things that I can get inspiration from and pull into the story to tell like this grand epic fantastic world and narrative that I wanted to tell. And so and that's pretty much how it started. And then later on, a concept that came and crashed it was the Eye of the Sahara, which I don't know if you know anything about the Eye of the Sahara. So it's a place, of course, it's a place in the Sahara, and it's a place that they spotted from out of space, and it looks like an eye. And if you ever interested in, it's called the Ricard structure, or if you type in the Eye of the Sahara, it'll also show up the same. Very, very interesting place that nobody really knows. They haven't really pinpointed exactly why it looks the way it does or how it ended up being the way it is. But it has the whole Atlantis kind of like feel, because it has like three circumvented rings that are perfectly placed, and they look like an eye in the middle of the Sahara. And so it started like, I started getting these ideas of what if Atlantis was once upon a time in the middle of the Sahara, when the Sahara was still green and fertile, still like blossoming, and it wasn't the desert that we see now. And so that spitballed a whole new chain of ideas. And so the story that I'm telling right now with Ocean's Odyssey in the Eye of the Sahara kind of like ties into the Sahara and a world that was once there before it became a desert. As the book goes on, it'll kind of like sort of reveal what my take on that actually, is.
Personally, I've been trying to come up with a book. It's not done yet because it's a long
Hmm.
way to go because it's half English, half in Spanish. But there are moments when I just sit down and say to myself, Phyllis, what the hell are you doing? You don't know absolutely anything. So, can you tell me about a time when you had no idea what you're doing when you're coming up with a book, or in the beginning or towards the end, maybe?
Oh man. Gotta think there's so many drafts, so many iterations of Ochin's Odyssey that I've written that just will never see the daylight. I mean, I'm talking like horrendous when I first started. I mean, it was just terrible. And after a while, you write so many iterations and so many drafts, and that's pretty much the natural way to finishing polished version of the book that I have now. But when I first started, for me, it was different because I was not author or a writer. Like I'd never, considered being one before up until that moment that I had the concept and finally decided to write in book form. So a lot of the time I had to do a lot of research. I had to do a lot of learning watched a lot of videos on authors and how they went about writing their books. I added to online classes, just trying to learn, the craft pretty much. But the best way for me to learn the craft was to just write and write and write, and and so that was the start. That was the first section of it, and a big chunk of Ocean's Odyssey and me writing it was learning the craft and getting better at the craft. And that was the first order of business. And so once you start writing and stuff like that, you start figuring out structure, and also by learning things like story structure and pacing and stuff like that, which come much later. Then you start to like figure out exactly how I'm going to formulate this book. How long do I want it? What style do I want it? Because that's also another thing that I had to learn was what style do I want to write it? What is my writer's voice? And so that too I had to attain, and that's from just writing, reading a lot, because I started reading at that time. I started reading a lot because that's also one of the best ways to learn is to read and to write. And I had to see how these other authors were doing and what their voices were, and incorporate a little bit of everything into mine, kind of like a melting pot situation where I picked the best of what I knew that I could do best. And Ocean's Odyssey is what is a amalgamation of all those things put together.
I'm
Uh-huh.
African myself, and
Uh-huh.
one thing that I know, and I know the rest of the Africans know, is that there are no stories as great as the ones from Africa. And you have lived in different countries in Africa, like you mentioned.
Yes.
So, what are some stories you gathered from your travels, or maybe a story you heard when you were young in Ghana?
And like I said, when you're part of the Ashanti culture, a lot of your stories come from the Anansi tales and the Anansi folklores and stuff like that, and how he stole the stories from the sky god and stuff like that. And so like those are a lot of times the stories that you would hear, and also just historical stories like a lot of that which inspired me was the Golden Stool and Yaa Santua during the British invasion of Ghana, colonialism and all that stuff. How, this one queen kind of like stood up against British rule and kind of like fought back and almost won, like she came pretty down close. And stories like that, she was kind of like a Joan of Arc of Ghana pretty much, and stories like that kind of like inspire me a lot, and that's just one of many from the continent. And then of course you read books like Things Fall Apart when you're younger, and that's a big impact when during your formative years. And also when you come down to like South Africa, for example, Shaka Zulu and stories like that. And just in general, just mythologies are just a big part of pretty much the storytelling aspect of it. And also, if you go to like East Africa, it's got so many. Like especially if you go way back, you got the Nubians and their wars with Kemet and stuff like. So a lot of historical aspects of the African continent was a lot of the time the biggest part of my inspiration. And so like and if you come back to the West, the Mali Empire, Songhai Empire, and so things like that was really a big part of my inspiration, more so than just stories, was the historical context and stuff like that. So
Speaking of inspiration, who are three people, just three, who are most influential to you?
I would say, like, are you talking like authors, or are you talking just in general, like that inform my
In
storytelling?
general, they don't have to be authors, just
Okay.
generalized.
Okay. In general, I would say, of course, I got Tolkien. I mean, just watching Lord of the Rings for the first time, that was something special, and that was a big inspiration. Of course, you got Star Wars. That too, same thing happened there. Just seeing that, on the screen when I was a young kid, that kind of like changes how you think. It blows up your imagination in such a big way, and you start to think of these just different aspects of the creative aspects and stuff like that and worlds, and you start to imagine stuff. So that's one, which is George Lucas and I guess Tolkien. And then pretty much things fall apart. Chino Achebe. was also one of my first big inspirations of just a journey of Okonkwo and what he goes on and stuff like that. It's like I call it the African tragedy, like how the Greek tragedies have stuff. It was like the African tragedy, and so that was also like a big inspiration that informed my writing and stuff like that.
Before you began writing and publishing your first novel, what are some of the myths you heard about the industry or the profession itself? Because there are some things that you'll hear about authors that will discourage you, there's some things you'll hear that will encourage you. So, what could be just one or a few myths that you heard about being an author?
I mean, of course, the first one you hear is it's not gonna make you any money, right? Like that's one of the big one. It's not the most profitable business ever, and you have to get really lucky to pretty much succeed as a writer. It's one of those things. It's like almost like it makes it seem as if it's like striking a lottery almost. And so like those are a lot of the things that you hear when you're first starting to write, and then also that it's one of those things that it takes a lot of time, and especially like with also things like publishing, how hard it is to get a publisher and stuff like that. But then fortunately for me too, at the time I started to write too, self-publishing was gaining momentum, and it's still gaining momentum. So one of those that's one of the main reasons I started writing, because I was like, I could kind of like not worry about going out there and looking for publishers once I was done and stuff like that. I could just work on this passion project and know that I could put it out myself and be happy with it, whether it's sold or not, or whether it became a mega success or not. It didn't really matter to me. To me, it was more so it was a passion project, and I'm just gonna do it and I'll put it out there, and whatever happens, happens. And so that was my mindset going into it. Another myth that I would hear is pretty much that it was hard. It was hard being a writer. That publishing a book was a tough thing to do. But then one those are all those things you just have as a creative person, as a writer, and as a passion. Those are all overridable. Like you can override those things because passion and the will to do it kind of like overrides those things, because that is what being in the artistry business kind of like is being able to push through because passion requires it, not so much the end focus or the means is to necessarily make profit, and that's what I'm in here for necessarily, because those are just adages, right? If the profit comes, that is really awesome, and you want that to be the product of what you make, but at the same time too, it's not the end to the means. It's more so like passion kind of overrules everything, and so that's my mindset going into it. And so I didn't really pay too much attention to those things. I just kind of like powered through. But if you're somebody who is really wanting to go in there, like, I want to make money, I want to, make sure this thing is successful, it's very possible. It's just, one of those things that is just, it takes a lot of work, and a lot of the myths are based on certain realities, but it's not the total reality. It's only becomes a reality if you really, really set on making it a reality. And nothing comes easy, and so it's just one of those things. You just got to keep working hard and hard at it, and you can see that you will overcome those things. And especially nowadays, like I said, the avenues are much bigger now for people to succeed in the author world, as in general. So.
So, Stephen Hawking, the scientist, passed away before he could figure out time travel, but he
Mhm.
did say it's possible. So, if you were given the chance to travel back in time and see your younger self, what advice would you give him at this very moment?
Honestly, I wouldn't change a thing, because for me it's one of those things, like almost like a, how do I say it? Not a butterfly effect, but I feel like if I went back and I would try to influence my younger self for some reason, I feel like it would change the outcome of the book, and I'm happy with how it came out. And the only thing I would necessarily think I would go back and tell myself is to, like, once I've actually published the technicalities of it, like to actually give myself a little edge, be like, this is exactly what you have to do so that you don't make like these small technical mistakes once you like publish, just being able to make sure that, you know, you're doing everything right with Amazon, or you're getting your book covers in time or stuff like that. So little things like that will be like, the things I kind of like hit myself back then if I did go back. But that's just, semantics, that's just small things. But as the book as a whole, as how it came out, I don't think I would change anything. Because I feel like the journey, struggles, and everything that I went through making this book and the time it took is what actually makes this book what it is right now. And so I wouldn't go back and tell myself, my younger self, anything.
Very interesting. How
Yeah.
would you hope that your journey as being a writer will shape you in the future? What person do you hope to be in the future in writing?
I think since I started writing, and as I keep writing, I'm hoping it makes me more aware of life in general, and also broadens my perspective, which it has a great amount. Just from just reading and stuff like that, and just writing, and makes me keeps nurturing me as a more intellectual person as I grow, and be able to formulate ideas and the way I carry myself, and just to be a better person as a whole too, as well. And so these are all the things that I hope it actually affects me. And so yeah, so as I keep writing and I keep going on, I hope these are the things that I take courses to keep growing as a more aware person, and also broaden my scope of how I think of the world, and ideas that I put to the page, and just also grow as an author in general, just to write better, to be able to formulate stories better and stuff like that. And so
Okay, so this next question, it's based on different opinions from different people. But if money was never an option to you, like you were to swipe lives with Bill Gates, what would you do every day, like every single day, without worrying about money or expenses or bills? What would you do every day?
oh man, that's so many things. First, I would travel the world. That would be the first order of business. I mean, there would be no part of this world that would not be untouched by my 2 feet. That's for sure. So traveling will be the first order of business. After I've got to know the world and got intimate with the world, then I guess I would spend the probably 90% of my money trying to figure out how to better the world, how to fix certain situations, and to make other people's lives better. And yeah, that would be the two things that would first come into my mind, that I would definitely, and especially the continent of Africa. I think, has suffered the most by a large margin. And so I think, like, that would be a big part of my focus, would be the continent, and just trying to see where I could be of assistance, in any way possible. And so yeah, so that would be the first orders of business.
Oh, personally, actually, my 80% of the time and money would be spent on research because I love facts and I love researching on different things. Like, I'd be in NASA, I'd actually have an office in NASA because I love exploration. I love knowing how to make the planet. I know how,
Uh-huh.
I love just finding facts, finding new places, finding new words you never knew existed. And actually, that's how I'd spend my time if I never had to worry about money or finances in any way.
Hey, that's an awesome way to spend the time, man. Like, as long as you're gaining something in return, right? That's what life is about. Now, if you're doing something and you're getting something in return, it's great. Especially if when it deals with intellectual pursuits and stuff like that. It's always awesome. And I love research too, because I writing with Chin's Odyssey, I mean, I spent probably 50%, if not more, on just research. And it's a lot of research, especially. And it was fun research because it was a lot of things that I didn't know about, the continent, about, our stories and stuff like that, and our cultures. And it informed a lot of who as I was writing, it was changing me at the same time because I was more aware, of the continent, and it makes you grow in a different way because you learn so much about, this place that you're from and the people that live within the continent itself.
What advice would you give someone who's trying to pursue a career in writing, especially fictional stories, or maybe a book in series form like yours?
Be passionate about what you're writing about. Don't be scared to invest time into it because time is one of the biggest methods to the madness. And I know a lot of things like it's hard to just be able to give out, a lot of time to something, but passion will inform that. If you're really passionate about something, give it a lot of time, because that is what's going to make whatever you're doing feel good or come out the way you want it to in the end. And I can't tell you any big or any great book or project or movie that hasn't put time in it. If you think about your favorite authors, your favorite movie makers, your favorite artists, they put the time and effort into it. So time is everything, and pretty much the rest will come. And so yeah, and so that is one of my biggest advices: time, passion, patience.
Sam, there's this little game I like to play when I'm trying to figure out ideas, let's say for a script or a certain story, and they
Mhm.
call it a plot point quest.
Mhm.
So it's 6 questions, very
Mhm.
short,
Mhm.
but at the end of each question, you just have to say the first thing that pops on your mind.
Okay.
Okay, so would you like to play this with me? It's very quick.
Let's do it.
All right, I'll read through the questions first before we begin.
Okay.
Okay, so once upon a time, there was blank, every day, blank, one day, blank, because of that, blank, because of that, blank, until finally, blank. So, are you ready?
All right. Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, we'll try. Once upon a time, there was
A rabbit.
every day,
He went to the hill.
one day,
He saw a fox.
because of that,
He ran away.
because of that,
He had to he had to figure out how to get to the other side of the hill.
until finally.
The fox was a friend and not there to eat him.
That's real funny, actually.
It's a twist, a plot
I
twist.
do that a lot.
A pl-
Yeah, it's a plot twist. I do that a lot when I'm trying to figure out what to write and I don't know what to do. So I just sit down and I'm like, all right, Phyllis, we're gonna figure this out. So let's come up with a story. So that was
Well, that's
nice. That's great.
oh, that's fun. That was fun.
Yeah, that's fun. Okay, if you're in my shoes right now, what questions would you have asked that I myself didn't ask you?
I mean, I think you did a great job. I mean, you nailed it. Yeah, I'm not too versed in the podcast, so I don't I don't know exactly what questions that I would have asked you that you didn't ask me.
Well, okay, personally,
That
I'm
that
just
would
trying to figure this podcasting
yeah.
thing out myself, but
Well, you're doing
I
you're
just
doing a
had to come up with.
you're doing a fantastic job. You're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. Okay, so would you have any questions for me? Probably. Maybe you had something you wanted to ask.
So exactly, is your book about? Because you said you're writing in half English, half Spanish. Do you speak Spanish?
I'm learning Spanish, but
Okay.
I speak fluent Swahili. But the book, it's about a Spanish group of friends who live in London, throughout the world. So they live in London, and they just found out that they have magical powers, and their family's business was not a wine business, but a magical family. And the friend found out too that they had magical. So it's just 17-year-old guys and chicks finding out they had these abilities they never did. And
Okay.
they're trying to figure out their way through this 21st century and trying to learn things that existed way beyond their time, and that's why it's taking so long, because I'm making up new characters, I'm making up new fictional characters that never existed in the books
Oh
before.
man, have fun with that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to learn about the whole South American history within a year. So it's
Oh
quite
man.
hard when you're trying to mix everything, because it's based around the world. You have London history, you have South American history, like the Mayans and the Aztecs, those old
Right,
people
right,
from
right. Old
back
world
the
history,
12th
yeah.
century. So, and then you add Spanish, which I'm practically learning and still trying to make it fit into the book. So it's kind of hectic, but it's working out. And
Oh, okay.
probably next year at the
Uh-huh.
end, I'd have it published. But I have another different book that I'm finishing up with, so that probably next year in the beginning, I have it published too. I wrote it when I was in high school, but
Oh,
it's a
okay.
series, so it's
Okay.
going off well for me.
Okay. And is what is the other book about?
About it's also fictional, but
Okay.
all about werewolves, vampires,
Okay.
witches. They all live
Okay.
together, which has never happened. And so we have we have this place called Weaverville. Okay, it's weird the name because I came up with it when I was 15. But
Uh-huh.
Weaverville stands for werewolves, vampires, and witchesville. So they live in one village all together, and they're trying to stop this one big demon. He's called Demophilia. And the ones who will save the day are a bunch of kids who are
Yeah.
15 and in Hawaii, rich kids who know nothing
Yeah.
about fighting. And they'll be the ones to save the day. So that's generally what the book is all about.
Oh, okay. Nice, 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 nice.
Yeah,
Oh
it
man.
is.
I mean, who doesn't love kids saving the day? That is our favorite. It's
Our
our favorite.
favorite
Right,
type of
right, right,
story.
right, right.
Like
They
in
got
Narnia, how and
right,
in
Harry
J.K. Rowling,
Potter.
how Harry
Yep.
Potter is the savior of the day for 7
Yeah,
years.
man. They got
By the way, J.K. Rowling has a new book. It's called Inkabog, but she says that it's not a spin-off of Harry Potter. It's supposed to be over by the end of November. Have you heard of it?
no, no. I have
Oh
not
my,
heard of
it's a
it.
very nice book. Considering she's an amazing author and she's one of my inspirations as an author, this book will be great. It's kind of similar to Harry Potter, but it's not a series, it's just a single book. And she
Uh-huh.
hasn't told anyone what it's generally about, but it's just fictional, all magic once again, but nothing like Harry Potter, obviously.
Okay. So okay, so she just announced it. She hasn't like published it or anything. It's just like an announcement.
Yeah, she announced it around July 31st, the day when it's supposed to be Harry Potter's birthday. So she just announced it like end of year, you'll be having this brand new book called Inkabog, and the cover is looking great actually. It seems to be a
Okay.
very nice book, and
Okay.
I have a lot of expectations for it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you got to. I mean, it's J.K. Rowling, so the
Yeah,
expectations are
obviously.
always high when it comes to her. So yeah, we'll see if she can strike lightning twice.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that
we'll
would be
see.
epic actually if she did.
Yeah, it would be. It would.
Have you ever thought about authors crossing books together? Let's say Harry Potter meets Narnia, or let's say Avatar meets Harry Potter itself, or Avatar meets Star Wars. Have you ever thought about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think almost every book does it to a certain degree. I know I did it with mine. Like I actually have like maybe like three or four crossovers that pretty much like I can handpick to be like, all right, that was the direct inspiration to this book that I can just name. And so like a lot of times, a lot of authors would pretty much Avatar meets like, a Percy Jackson, American Gods meet, so it's one of those things. I think authors do it more often than not. It's more so how much of it do you incorporate in your book, and how much of the crossover. Is it like a direct crossover, or is it an indirect crossover, or is it like a light crossover that you took from those books and like you kind of like mishmash into yours? So yeah, so it's more so that, but a lot of the times authors really do that a lot. I hope that answered the question.
So
Fan
that
fiction.
actually did answer
Oh,
my question. It
okay,
did,
okay.
because I personally have done that. Like in the first book, like I told you, when you
Uh-huh.
come to think of it, it's Harry Potter meets Twilight meets Greek mythology. That's how the book is. Because I sat
Right.
down and my name personally is derived from Greek mythology. I love Twilight and I love Harry Potter. So I was like, tell us, what can we do with these three things that you love? So I was like, a mix. We have
You're
a
right.
cocktail of stories. So we have a Harry Potter meets Twilight meets Greek mythology. And when you come to think of it, it makes a pretty good story because it's something you never expected.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. Yes, I said, it's almost tough not to cross over things unless you're like, especially in the fiction, if you're in a fiction genre. I mean, yeah, you are going to cross over. Unless you're trying to write a one for one of something, you are going to cross over. Like mine, I would say mine is a crossover between Percy Jackson, American gods, and African mythology, and with sprinkled in with a little bit of Narnia or Harry Potter, depending on the portal fantasy aspect that you want to take, into consideration. Yeah, so it's almost hard not to.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you for being on the show, Sam. We enjoyed having you here.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. I hope your fans love this podcast.
Oh, I'm sure they will, but if there is any way that the listeners would want to find you online, where can they reach you at?
They can find me on Twitter at AnimateWorks. It's my Twitter handle. Or you can just search s.animaddo. And then my main base of operations is my website, which is www.anim, the letter 8, works.com. And so from there you can pretty much there's links to buy the book and stuff like that. Same thing with my Twitter. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I mostly operate with my Twitter and my website, and I'm also going to start doing some marketing on Instagram soon. With Instagram, it's the same thing too, s.animaddo, with like my author name, and yeah, you can find me there. And once you go there, it's a lot of concept art and stuff like that. That's what my Instagram page is mostly going to be, because that is the other aspect of me that I enjoy doing.
Okay, I'll link all your socials in the description so that will be easy for them to find. And
Thank you.
I hope you have an amazing holiday. It's Christmas season, so happy holidays, Sam.
Oh, well, thank you very much. You too.
Yeah, and I hope to see you in this podcast once again next year when we are back here with another episode of authors and their journey in writing.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, fellas.
Wow, I'm so glad you've made it to the end of today's interview. Our guest today was Samuel Anim Addo, otherwise known as Sam, and he is the author of Ochin's Odyssey. You should go on ahead on Amazon and buy the book and start off reading. It's an amazing book. And if you love fiction and African mythology, this is the right one for you. If you'd like to reach out to him or to me, our social links will be in the description down below. I hope you have an amazing Christmas. And for now, have an amazing week ahead. And I hope you join us here tomorrow for day 3. Same place, same time. Goodbye.